Welcome to Formosa Dream Chasers.
We're your hosts, Mary Ann
and Qing-en.
Please join us as we explore the journeys amazing people take in pursuit of their dreams.
And get insights from their experiences.
Let's hit the road.
And get started. Welcome to Formosa Dream Chasers. Today we are delighted to welcome Daphne Lo, a passionate Pilates expert and advocate for healthy living. Born and raised in South Africa, and she developed a love for sports early on, excelling in dance, music, and gymnastics. She later returned to Taiwan to study physical therapy at China Medical University, 中国医药大学, where she first encountered Pilates.
After graduating, Daphne trained professionally in Pilates in South Africa and earned her BASI, Body Art and Science International certification in 2015. Since then, she's taught in South Africa and Sydney, focusing on fitness and wellness. Believing that prevention is better than cure, she aims to help everyone achieve a balanced, pain-free life through safe and effective exercise. Daphne has now established her own studio in her parents' hometown of Hualien, where she promotes Pilates in eastern Taiwan. Welcome, Daphne.
Thank you.
Please say hello to our audience and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. This is Daphne. So I grew up in South Africa. I was born in a city called Bloemfontein, which is in the middle of South Africa, and majority of people spoke Afrikaans. And then my parents, they decided that education is very important, so we moved to Cape Town, which is quite a central place, very bustling with tourism and different cultures, different religions. And I grew up there until I was 19. So after high school, I decided to come back to Taiwan. My parents are Taiwanese, so they just recommended that maybe studying something that I enjoy and being in a safer space would be good for me, because I don't know if you know that safety in South Africa isn't the best. And in order, if you want to study anything medical, you have to do a 1-year kind of community service, and which you'll be placed at different locations. So my parents were a bit worried about where I'll be placed. So I think they just decided that maybe it's good to just go back to Taiwan and study. Yeah.
Okay. So you wanted to... Well, okay, I have so many questions.
Go for it.
First of all, why did your family move to South Africa?
So on my dad's side, we had relatives that were part of the, in Chinese it's called 农耕队. So it's basically Taiwanese government. They had a liaison with South Africa at the time, and they would send kind of agricultural services or kind of teaching the locals in South Africa how to farm. So it's just a kind of service exchange. There were a lot of Taiwanese people in South Africa. And then my dad's relatives like, hey, why not come to South Africa? We're opening up a factory. They need employees. Why not come? And my parents were very brave at the time. They flew halfway across the world to South Africa. And that's where my brother and I were born.
Out of curiosity, did your parents speak English at the time?
My mom spoke English,
okay.
So she majored in English, so that's why she was able to go. My dad picked up English along the way. I actually don't know how he survived there, but he did. Yeah.
That's cool. And then you mentioned, well, there are a couple of things that I wanted to get into. The first one is we read that as a young girl, you had an interest in dance music and gymnastics. Yeah. So how did you develop that interest?
I was always athletic. I wasn't like ADHD athletic, but like I would imagine, listening to music, I would love to dance. I think sports was always one of my passions. And I was quite competitive growing up as well in different sports. So we played netball, which is, it's different to basketball. It's kind of like the English version of what basketball would look like. And I did ballet when I was young. So I think ballet was my mom's idea, because she would think that any kind of dance, ballet would be the foundation of it. So how to have good posture, how to use your... when we were young, we didn't know how to use our core, basically, but better posture, how to learn about different music types, and gymnastics was after ballet. So I did ballet for about 5 years before point shoes. And my mom's like, you're not going to be a international dancer, so let's not go into that because it's quite expensive. I was like, okay. And then my mom was like, okay, now I was like, I would still want to do something that's dance related. So I looked into rhythmic gymnastics, which is like on the floor. We have like ribbons and balls and the different apparatus. They didn't have that at my primary school, but they had kind of traditional gymnastics. So I was like, cool, let's go and try that out. And then lo and behold, I somehow got into the national, like I qualified to go into the national gymnastics competition.
Amazing.
And mom's like, no, you're not going to be international gymnastics. She just wants me to find a hobby, not like make it a kind of, you know,
career
out of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So she's very open about, you know, kids should try out different things and see what they like, but kind of hold back on making this a career and making it so competitive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why didn't you? Well, okay, it sounded like your mom had very, if I may just jump in a little bit, your mom had very definite ideas of what is okay as a career and what isn't. What did your mom want you to be?
So she, like what I say now is probably like a tiger mom, but she's not a
My
typical.
mom's the same. My mom's the same. I totally understand.
Yeah, I think she knew that this was just a phase. Like I enjoyed it, but at the same time, I think it's also a financial decision. Like my parents, they worked very hard for us to be in school. So we didn't grow up like financially abundant. So these competitions, we would have to pay everything ourselves. So like traveling to different cities, the flights, everything, accommodation, we had to pay for ourselves. So my mom's like, well, you're still in, what was I? Primary school. I was like, you're still in primary school. Let me at least matriculate, at least get to high school. By the end of it, if you want to still continue, then sure, go for it. But I think they are very focused on getting us through school. That would just be their main goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So did you learn to play the piano?
Oh yeah,
Because, you know, traditional Taiwanese parents
Yeah,
always, they want their
Oh,
children to learn how to play the piano.
Who learned to play the piano here?
Me.
Me. Okay. It's an Asian thing. Yeah, definitely an Asian thing. Yeah. So we played piano, or we learned piano for quite a while. My mom she was very ahead of her time, I actually think. Because she made me, not my brother. So we learned music, we learned piano. My brother went into learning violin. And mom was like, hey, do you want to learn violin? Because then you can just use your brother's violin. I'm like, nope, I don't want to use that. No, I'm not interested in string instruments. I want to play like flutes and like woodwind instruments. But then eventually I played the saxophone because I was like, saxophone is cool. Girls playing it is very like sexy and everything. I'm like, I'm not going to play violin. So we eventually kind of spread to different instruments. But she was very, you know, focused on making us have a good foundation of everything. Just have like knowledge to music, to movement, and ultimately I think she wants us to find a way to kind of de-stress ourselves. We didn't understand that when we were growing up. We're like, okay, we're just learning all these things. Sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. But now as an adult, I would think like, oh, I listen to music to feel better, have a better mood. So for me, music is very important. And when we had the time, we would play piano. We had a piano at home, but not in Taiwan because I don't want to. Yeah. So we grew up with the mentality that music is important in our lives. I think it's probably because it was important to my mum as well. She really enjoys music. My grandfather, so her dad, was a music teacher. So that's probably why we even ended up learning music.
I'm also curious about growing up in South Africa as an Asian. And what was it like? Can you tell us more about it?
Actually, me too. Did you grow up during the time of
apartheid?
Yeah.
So apartheid ended in 1992 when Mandela became president. So I was born in 91. So I just transitioned into it. But I think growing up, you still kind of encounter racism. And I don't know, maybe because we just grew up with it, so we didn't think otherwise. But yeah, growing up, we'd be like, hey, that's a bit unfair, that's discrimination. So what was it like growing up being the minority as an Asian? It was interesting in the sense that, you know, they would look at you and be like, hey, ching chong, and all these like really not good. not very educational kind of names. I'm just like, okay, well, at least my parents would be like, hey, just ignore them. They don't know what they're talking about. But because we are the minority, my mom was very adamant about it. She's like, you need to make sure that you represent Taiwanese people. So what kind of good qualities do you want to make sure? Because maybe in their lifetime they only meet this Taiwanese person. That's you. So what would you want to bring across the table and show them, like, hey, Taiwanese people are very pleasant or whatever. So we were at least I was very kind of polite and not overly like the Asian people would be, but at least I would not kind of I wouldn't say I want to embarrass Taiwanese people. Yeah, so set a standard to that.
So were those people like white guys?
White guys, black guys, colored guys, like anyone.
So all of them like
usually
have certain kind of discrimination against Asians?
Oh, so I think it's just a lack of education because they don't see us often. On TV, they would be like, "Oh, Jackie Chan." That's the only Asian people like they would know. Okay. So they would be like, "Hey, look, Jackie Chan," and then sometimes we would just be like, "Yeah, that's my uncle," basically, because we're so sick of them making fun of us, and like we've heard that joke a million times. Like, might as well have an interesting comeback. Yeah, you just gotta make a joke out of it. You can't take it too seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you guys were growing up, because of apartheid, where would Asians be placed?
On the color spectrum?
No, because they were so strict about the whole color.
Yeah.
So we're not black, nor are we white.
No.
So how?
So, we were like the middle child. We didn't know where we belonged. So during apartheid, there was white people were in charge, right? So when we went to university, it was quite interesting. So if you apply to any university in South Africa, you would have to tick your race,
right?
Which is, I think, it's just for statistic purposes. But anyway, there would be in white, and then there would be Indian because there are a lot of Indian people, and then there would be black, and then there would be other. So we'd be like other,
Okay.
Eventually there was an Asian block, but then that was like much later. So yeah. I think Asian people, not just Taiwanese, like any Asian Oriental skin would be discriminated from both sides because we weren't black enough and they weren't white enough. So after Mandela took over, obviously black people had more kind of empowerment, but we were still left in the middle. Like, we also suffered from when the white people would take charge, and then pardon me, eventually the locals, so in South Africa, obviously there's a few generations of Asian people. They eventually stood up for themselves. They're like, hey, we also need to be looked after. We can't just be thrown around and be discriminated the whole time. So eventually we did kind of cross over into the black empowerment. So it's called BEE, Black Empowerment something, I can't remember. But yeah, so we would have some kind of credentials from before. So
it seems there's a very different like racial dynamics in South Africa.
Yeah, because growing up, I really enjoyed growing up in South Africa. It's a different culture and you learn about so many different religions, so it just opens up your horizons a lot more, and people are okay with differences. But then there's just a few people that makes it a little bit uncomfortable when we have conversations, because they weren't, they didn't come across or didn't encounter different people in their lives. So the questions they ask would sometimes kind of alarm you, like, oh, this is very strange. I've never thought about how someone would think about that like that. Yeah.
Can you give an example? Like,
so it'd be like Christianity, because I'm Buddhist, and so in growing up, our fellow students would have different religions and everything.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not saying Christianity is a bad thing. They're wonderful people. There's always like an extremist in between. And basically they'll be like, oh, if you don't believe in God, then you're all going to hell. Or like majority of us don't believe in Jesus Christ. So you're basically just damning everyone. And you're going to have no friends, basically. So we kind of left her alone. Like, okay, you do you. We're just going to carry on with our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So being closed-minded, I mean, yeah. I think you would come across that anywhere, basically. But I think in South Africa, we're more open to talk about it, because if there's a whole class, I think there's no like 50% is only whites or only whatever. So it's very diverse city, and I think that's helped shape how I think as well. So I'm very open-minded. I'm just curious about everything. Yeah, and then just meeting new people and learning how their culture, their background, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so
that's interesting. Yeah.
so you develop an interest in music, dance, and gymnastics. Why didn't you choose to study these fields instead of physical therapy?
So this is a funny story. Physical therapy, I actually didn't know what it was when I was growing up. But because I was coming back to Taiwan to study, and so I was basically an kind of overseas student. You would just see where your grades are, and you get placement to which kind of universities you would choose. So which options you would have, basically. And I knew that I didn't want to become a medical doctor. It just never gravitated towards me. I just like, I want to help people, but I want to be in close range with them and help them in a different way. Because growing up, I didn't take that many medicine. So I think in Taiwan, because it's the national medical aid, everyone's very like,
if you're sick, go to the doctor.
Exactly. Go to the doctor, and then they'll prescribe some medicine for you and whichever. Growing up in South Africa, we didn't have that, and medical bills are super expensive. So we couldn't afford to get sick. So we just kind of made, I don't know, I feel like our immune systems are stronger. I would think. So I didn't want to become a medical doctor, but I take my hat off to medical doctors, nurses. They do an amazing job. I just kind of knew what I wanted. And then I saw physical therapy. I kind of looked into it. I was like, what is this? And I just, by chance, got into it. And I was like, hey, it's got biology. I loved biology growing up. So like anatomy, biology, all that stuff. And I was like, hey, this is okay. Might as well give it a shot. And then after the first year freshman, I really enjoyed it. So I just thought, hey, might as well carry on with it.
So during your study, what drew you to Pilates?
Oh, so third year, during our third year, we had an elective subject, and it was Pilates.
Oh.
So that's how I got into it. Because Pilates...
Is that also part of the therapy?
Yeah. So Pilates is also a rehabilitative kind of form of therapy or exercise. And that's why a lot of physical therapists actually go into Pilates.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's part of rehabilitation in a sense, because so the history of Pilates is this German guy called Joseph Pilates. So he was alive over 100 years ago. So he kind of made or created this type of exercise for injured soldiers during World War II. And that's how they were kind of the equipment that we have today with Pilates. But back in the day, it was basically he took like a random spring from a bed mattress. So back in the day, the beds had springs, right? And, these soldiers would be lying in the hospital bed. They couldn't move. They had a cast on their leg. And he'd be like, okay. So he took a spring out of the bed. It'd be like attached it to a corner of one of the beds and then to the guy's leg. He's like, okay, start moving and see how this goes. So he obviously had a lot of lab rats just like trying it out and see like if this worsens his condition or not. But yeah, so eventually you're like, hey, you didn't die and you got better, so it should be fine. And that's how I came across to be like this.
That's all the time we have for this week. Want to learn how Daphne developed her Pilates career and her philosophy on the practice? Be sure to tune in next week to hear more about her journey.
This is Ching and Cho.
And Mary Ann Shoko.
See you guys next week. Bye.
Want to stay up to date or view past RTI programs, videos, and news stories? Come check out our website at english.rti.org.tw.